Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating mystery right at the intersection of personal finance and macroeconomic theory. We're looking at a classic piece of research by economists Karen Dinan, Jonathan Skinner, and Steven Zeldis that tackles a fundamental question about how wealth is actually built in our society. It's a topic that shapes literally everything from our tax policies to our understanding of wealth inequality, and let me tell you, the journey to the answer is incredibly eye-opening.
So let's just get right into it. Do the rich save a higher fraction of their income? Now, if you ask someone on the street this, they might look at you like you're absolutely crazy. I mean, it seems like a completely obvious question with a very obvious answer, right? But in the world of academic economics, this exact question was the subject of a massive, heated, and decades-long debate.
To really get why there was so much tension here, we have to look at two totally opposite perspectives. On one hand, we have the non-economist view. Common sense just tells us that low-income people simply can't afford to save. Once you pay for rent, food, and basic necessities, there's literally nothing left over in those pockets. So naturally, high-income earners must save a larger percentage of their money. But then, on the other hand, we have the classic economist view from the 1950s, which argued something highly counterintuitive. They believe that saving rates are actually flat across a person's entire lifetime of income.
Section 1. The Great Saving Debate, a History of Disagreement. Okay, so to understand where the economists were coming from, we have to wrap our heads around a concept called permanent income. Now, permanent income isn't your salary this year, it's your anticipated lifetime resources. The theory goes a bit like this. People like to keep their consumption relatively smooth over their lives. So picture having a temporarily high income year. Maybe you got a massive, unexpected bonus. You wouldn't just blow it all, right? You'd save a good chunk of it to smooth things out for the future. On the flip side, if you have a genuinely bad year, you'll save way less or even dip into your savings to keep your lifestyle stable. Economists argued that if you zoom out and look at true, lifetime, permanent income, everyone's saving rate basically balances out proportionally.
And this wasn't just some fringe idea, by the way. This was championed by the legendary Nobel-winning economist Milton Friedman way back in 1957. He stated that people with high permanent income consume the exact same fraction of it as those with low permanent income. This single theory completely dominated macroeconomic models for decades. It was mathematically elegant, and it allowed researchers to build models assuming that a single representative agent could just reflect the saving behavior of the whole economy.
Section 2. The Economist's Counterargument, a Data Investigation.
Now, to actually settle a debate that's been raging for decades, you need incredibly robust data, and combining these sources was an enormous undertaking. The researchers didn't just look at one isolated source, they cross-referenced three massive, really high-quality empirical data sets: the Consumer Expenditure Survey, the Survey of Consumer Finances, and the Panel Study of Income Dynamics. By looking at consumption, changes in wealth, and literally decades of income tracking all at once, they were able to eliminate blind spots and get a comprehensively accurate picture of how Americans actually manage their money.
But, they ran into a major hurdle. How exactly do you measure someone's permanent lifetime income when you're only surveying them in the present moment? Well, to filter out those temporary income bumps we talked about earlier, they did some incredibly clever detective work using proxy variables. Things like a person's education level, their past and future earnings, and even what they spend on vehicles and food. These are steady, long-term indicators that cut right through the noise of a single bad year and give us a much more accurate read on a household's true, permanent economic status.
Section 3. What the data reveals. The smoking gun.
So here is the absolutely crucial point. The classical theory? It was just wrong. The estimated saving rates are completely disproportionate. They range from less than 5% for the bottom quintile of the income distribution all the way up to a staggering 40% or more of income for the top 5% of earners. Think about that for a second. The rich don't just save more total dollars, they save a massively larger fraction of every single dollar they earn.
And this brilliantly illustrates the reality on the ground. The Survey of Consumer Finances data maps this out perfectly. Notice how, as you move higher up the income brackets, the saving rate doesn't just stay flat like Milton Friedman predicted. It trends aggressively upward. Whether you use education, lagged earnings, or current income as your metric, that trajectory is undeniably steep.
And we see the exact same confirmation over in the Panel Study of Income Dynamics data too. Even when the researchers created a highly comprehensive saving measure, one that included active saving plus imputed Social Security and private pension contributions, that bold upward slope remains. The wealthy inherently accumulate a larger fraction of their income, period.
Section 4. Why the rich save more, a process of elimination.
So why does this happen? First, the researchers had to rule out a few common assumptions. They rejected the idea that this was purely driven by differences in Social Security replacement rates. They also found that differences in time preference, which is just the idea that wealthy people are inherently more patient, well, that didn't fully explain the data either, especially when looking at the elderly who just continue to save. They even ruled out subsistence levels as the sole driver, meaning this isn't just a simple matter of lower income groups only buying basic groceries while the rich have endless extra cash lying around after buying caviar.
Instead, the evidence actually points to a really powerful dual motive model. Step 1 is precautionary saving. High-income earners aggressively stockpile money to protect against catastrophic, late-life medical expenses or health disasters. Step 2 is an operative bequest motive. They have a really strong desire to pass whatever is left over down to their children. These two motives combine to create this massive engine for continuous wealth accumulation, even well into retirement.
Now, what makes this an incredibly fascinating look at systemic incentives is how it contrasts with lower-income households. For these groups, asset-based, means-tested social insurance programs, think of things like Medicaid, well, they provide a consumption floor. Because these safety nets exist, it becomes less imperative and, frankly, a bit less rational for lower-income households to hoard cash for medical emergencies. They already have a baseline of systemic protection that the wealthy basically intend to self-fund.
Section 5. Why this matters today, the economic impact.
So, what you should really take away from all this is a fundamental rethinking of wealth inequality. The wealth gap in our society isn't merely the result of some people having larger salaries than others. No, it is heavily compounded by the mechanics of saving. Because higher earners are stashing away 40% of their income, while lower earners are saving less than 5%, that wealth gap accelerates exponentially over a lifetime.
And this reality deeply impacts how we evaluate tax policies. Take the debate between an income tax and a consumption tax. An income tax impacts earnings and the interest generated from those savings. But if a society shifts toward a flat consumption tax, researchers note it could inadvertently act regressively. Now, why does that happen? Because as we've just seen, the wealthy save and bequeath a massive portion of their wealth rather than consuming it. If you only tax consumption, a huge fraction of high-income wealth bypasses the tax system entirely.
And that brings us to the definitive conclusion from Danan, Skinner, and Zeldis. They basically drop the mic with this simple statement. We believe that our work has established one fact. The rich do indeed save more. The 1950s proportionality myth is officially busted.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question to ponder today. If empirical data proves that the wealthy inherently accumulate a significantly larger fraction of their income, well, how should this reality shape our approach to modern tax reform and our overall understanding of wealth inequality? It's a really complex issue, but by relying on the hard data, we can start having much more informed conversations. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I encourage you to keep questioning the obvious, because sometimes the data tells a completely different story.